Hey everyone, I'm Tim. Welcome to Westcott Workshop. Today we're going to be building a set of red oak bookshelves for my office. Let's go. I'm making both the case and the shelves from 3/4 inch red oak plywood. Everything is about 10 inches wide, so the first thing I did was take it to the table saw and start ripping it to width. The sheet of plywood was pretty heavy, so I set up a temporary outfeed table to help support it at the end of the cut. After ripping each piece down to 10 inches on the table saw, I took it over to the chop saw to cut it down to length. My chop saw can only do about 6 to 7 inches per cut, so I had to flip each board over and cut it a second time to get through the full 10 inches. The case itself is going to be assembled using pocket screws. The bottom two shelves are going to be fixed in place to provide the lower support for the case. This was the first time I've really gotten to use my Kreg K5 on a project, and it definitely makes pocket holes quick and easy. The bottom shelves are going to sit about 3 inches above the floor. So to help myself in the assembly process, I measured 3 inches up and drew a line across each of the 3 pieces that make up the vertical components of the case. I then took several pieces of scrap wood and clamped them right at that line that I just drew. I'm hoping that these will act as some sort of stop block, so that when I screw the shelves in place, they'll all end up in the correct position. I used a speed square just to check that my shelf and vertical support were at roughly 90 degrees to each other before I screwed them together. After I finished attaching this part of the bottom shelf, I flipped the project around and started working on the horizontal support that makes up the top of the casing. I did the same process for this as I did earlier, except this time I only measured in 3/4 of an inch. I want this piece to sit flush with the top of the case. When fully assembled, the bookcase is going to be pretty large. It's going to be about 4 feet tall and 7 feet long. So I assembled it one half at a time and then joined those two halves together to create the whole case. When joining the two halves together, I used the exact same process. I drew lines and I put stop blocks down to help everything stay aligned. With the basic case assembly complete, it's starting to look like a bookshelf, and I really like it. The case needed a little more support on the bottom side, so I used 3-inch strips of the same 3/4 inch plywood and just attached them with pocket screws. This is going to be sitting in my office, and it's going to be something that I see pretty much every day. So I don't really want to be looking at the end grain and the laminations on the front of the bookshelf. So I picked up some 3/4 inch red oak board from Home Depot and I ripped it down to make some face trim. The face trim is going to be about 1 inch wide, while the plywood is only 3/4 inch. So I'll have a little bit, about a 1/4 inch overhang on the inside of the case. I attached the trim to the front of the case using wood glue and brad nails. I only used the brad nails to attach the top and bottom of the trim because I didn't want to have to fill in too many holes. I wanted the outside of the trim to be flush with the outside of the case, so I got out a bunch of clamps and put them in place until the glue dried. The face trim on the center support was the only one that was a little different. This one was 1 1/4 inch wide so that I could have the same 1/4 inch overhang on each side of the center support. Before I tightened the clamps completely, I used a combination square just to make sure that I had a 1/4 inch overhang on each side of the center support. At this point, I started getting into a groove, and it moved a lot quicker. I was really only limited by my number of clamps and having to wait for glue to dry before moving to the next section of trim. I'm adding what I would call a kickboard to the bottom of the bookshelf. That'll cover this lower face trim and allowed me just to use the brad nailer all the way across. Because I didn't want any nail heads showing on the front of the kickboard, I decided to only attach it using glue. If I had thought about it before I got to this point, I could have added some pocket holes to the bottom front side of the lower shelf, and then just screwed in from the back side into the kickboard. But I didn't think about it then, and honestly, the glue was holding fine, so I'm really not worried about it. The kickboard ended up having a slight warp to it. But it really didn't end up being a problem. I just had to work section by section and make sure that everything was lined up properly. Well, unfortunately, I have to stop this project here. My couple days at home in between work trips have come to an end and the project's not complete. So I'll be working the next few days. Once I get back, we'll keep working on the bookshelf. Thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have enjoyed it, I'd love to get your comments down below, see what you think. I'd also love for you to subscribe to the channel, be part of Westcott Workshop. And until next time, keep building.